Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope everybody's having a fantastic holiday. We made it, ladies and gentlemen. It is game week. The NFL season gets underway. Your Miami Dolphins taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. At home, 1 o'clock, Hard Rock Stadium. And Mike McDaniel is fired up for this week. An interesting matchup because I definitely think that if you look on paper, I would definitely look at the Dolphins and say, yeah, they got the more explosive talent. But there are some tests that they're going to have to overcome. Like, Jacksonville's not a pushover team. And I think, like, you look at the spread, you're like, yeah, I think people acknowledge the Dolphins probably have a slightly better roster and should get the win, especially at home. The Miami Dolphins have been such a great home team under Mike McDaniel, and Tua's really, really good at Hard Rock Stadium. So they definitely have some things leaning in their favor. But as Mike McDaniel pointed out today, their offensive line, which he feels really good about. I mean, he couldn't reiterate it enough that he feels great about this offensive line. The big news today that Aaron Brewer is going to be out there, and he is going to be practicing. He's practicing. Benito Jones is practicing. Tyreek Hill is practicing. Jalen Waddle is practicing. All great news on the fronts as the Miami Dolphins get ready for their real work. But you look at a team in Jacksonville that just has an absolute monstrosity of a pass rusher in Josh Hines Allen. Got to get used to that. A little bit weird. Usually the Dolphins are used to getting wrecked by a Josh Allen, but it's the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. This guy's an absolute game wrecker. 17.5 sacks last season. And then on the other side, you got Trayvon Walker, their former number 1 overall pick, who did take a leap last year, got into that double-digit sack category. They had Eric Armstead up front to give him a little bit more push, give him a little bit more oomph. But they also have a lot of similarities with the Miami Dolphins in that I think that if you read a lot of the Jaguars' concerns coming into this year and talk about where they want to improve, a lot of it is similar to the Dolphins in that they want to win these battles in the trenches. They sucked at 3rd and short last year, getting a little bit more ferocity up front on the defensive side of things. So while they have talent on the defensive side and some elite players that can really game wreck, they also are trying to have this first matchup. And Mike McDaniel, put it on that this is a good first test for the Dolphins, pass protection and what they're bringing to the table. The good news is almost eerily quiet training camp for Teron Armstead, who should be good to go. And everybody feels good about, what Austin Jackson's going to bring to the table. So I think you're getting into this and you feel okay. You think that everything is going to be rounded into form. But for Miami to have this whole ordeal this offseason about they're going to be the bullies, right? They're going to be the team that pushes teams around, and they're going to, bring that. I think this is kind of a good warm-up, especially for what's coming the next week, because the Buffalo Bills, who have lost a lot of outside talent, they're probably going to bring nothing but thunder to this game. And for Jacksonville, speaking of Buffalo, they put Mitch Morse back from Buffalo into their defense, into their offensive line to try and give them some of that. But this is definitely going to be an interesting first test to see how Miami brings it. And also, how long is it going to take to adjust as a defensive system? I was pretty pumped today to see that Zach Sealer it on up, was named a captain of the Miami Dolphins. The captains were revealed today. Here was the list for those who are interested. Your Miami Dolphins captains for the 2024 season. You had Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Ramsey, the Cheetah, Tyreek Hill, David Long, who I don't believe was one last year, Alec Ingold, Teron Armstead, and then your mauler up front, Zach Sealer. He's a captain. And Calais Campbell, which not a surprise based on how everybody was speaking of Calais this offseason. So to see him get the C, very little surprise in that he's going to get that opportunity. I think if I look at this matchup, though, in the early goings, Jacksonville and the Dolphins, I do think that look, if the Dolphins can eradicate that pass rush and they get Tua gets the ball out super quick, I do think that you look at a secondary that there is some opportunity there for the Dolphins to feast. They gave Tyson Campbell the bag this offseason. I think he's the highest paid cornerback to never make a Pro Bowl. But they lost a lot of pieces, so they're infiltrating some new. They got a new defensive coordinator. So there's also going to be, a lot of teams learning. You can't really use that as there's no excuse there for, we're all adjusting, because everybody's adjusting. Their defense is adjusting, so is the Jaguars defense. So it's really going to come down to, all right, what are the talents? How much are we going to get out of Jalen Phillips this week? How much are the reins completely off him? Are they a little on him because they have a game in 4 days? Is he on a pitch count? What is the smart thing to do for a guy like this? Do they figure, come out of the gate gangbusters week 1, and then, maybe they rein him way back? Or do they feel like, no, he can go 2 games and then he's going to get 10 days off? That's going to be a fascinating decision for them in their own right. Because, this is definitely a game I think that you're going to want to get some pressure on a Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence is a guy who can make some questionable decisions. That's probably, you look at what their big crux is on offense, and they have weapons, and Gabe Davis, who's a track star and has had success against the Dolphins in certain games with his time in Buffalo. They get a first-round pick in Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. So, and then Christian Kirk is solid. Solid. A lot of people looked at him, and Christian Kirk's kind of looked at as like, he's kind of looked upon as like that guy in the receiver market who like got the amount of money that he got. Everybody was like, what? And he's kind of got it for like as a fine receiver, a fine weapon. They got a badass tight end in Evan Ingram, who's led the team in catches last year, almost at 1,000 yards. Big time weapon for them. So there'll be a challenge there that they got to kind of corral. He's another. He's probably as solid and dangerous. We don't know what the rookie's going to bring to the table, but everybody kind of thinks the world of him. Gabe Davis, fast as hell. But we also know that Trevor Lawrence is prone to 2 things. He can throw interceptions, and he can fumble the holy hell out of the football. So definitely is a guy who's a decent runner. Like, I think if you look at the elite runners around the league, you're like, oh, it's Lamar Jackson and it's Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Like, he's not in that category, but he's mobile. Like, he's a threat. He's a threat. He's not somebody you can just dismiss as far as his mobility is concerned. He's a big dude. And their running back, who I honestly think, the guy, in my opinion, has really been carrying Trevor Lawrence since college, is Travis Etienne. Like, this guy was a nightmare against the Miami Hurricanes, and is really, really good. I don't think anybody looks at him as like the best in the league, but he's really talented. And I think that, to me, is going to be the interesting tone. Like, can the Dolphins stuff that right away to show, no, this is a new identity. This is this whole bully mentality. This, are they bullies or are they bull bleepers? Like, what is really going to get brought to the table here for the Miami Dolphins in this matchup? That's going to be the interesting thing, because I think both of these teams have a lot of big goals this year, but aren't looked upon as the favorites in their division. Jacksonville looks up at Houston. The Dolphins look up at Buffalo with a side eye. I think they both, they look side eye over to the Indianapolis Colts, side eye over to the New York Jets. So I think probably by most accounts, both of these teams are looked upon as second best in their respective divisions, but have lofty expectations. Both their quarterbacks got the bag this offseason. I think Trevor Lawrence was kind of this line of demarcation for the Tua contract talks. It's like, hey, he hasn't done as much as Tua. And the thing that's fascinating with Trevor Lawrence, and I know they're not facing each other, but the thing that's fascinating with Trevor Lawrence is he got a lot of the prodigy stuff that Tua did, like right off the bat. Wins a championship right out of the gate in Clemson, right? And then Tua, we all know his star, was immediate because of how he bursted onto the scene in the national championship game. So both of these guys were looked upon as like tankable players. Tua had the brutal injury, and Trevor Lawrence has kind of just been skating along. He plays in a market that doesn't, I guess, get the buzz that other ones do, but it is the NFL. And even still, like, with his inconsistencies, has not dealt with anywhere near the drama that Tua has. And in fact, when his coach was an ass clown and Urban Meyer, which, you know, is just one of the worst hires of all time and is getting lap dances in a bar during a bye week, it was all, oh, poor Trevor Lawrence, you know. But Tua, people were like rats off a ship immediately. Like now the chickens are kind of coming to roost a little bit with people getting after Brian Flores, but that wasn't the case at the time. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic going into this game. But that being said, the Dolphins are favored. The Dolphins are at home. I do lean their roster a little bit, you know, being a little bit older, but also I think being a little bit more polished. I think the weapons, I think there's no question the Dolphins have better weapons, but they got to go execute. And I think this is definitely one of those games where, you know, you want to dictate that stuff like right off the bat, and I think see where you can kind of throw that first punch and see how that rides out for the game, and see what the new intricacies are for this Dolphins. See how much Johnny Smith is brought into the fold. See how much we see, you know, some of the new Julian Hill, a Tanner Connor, you know, are any of these guys who are on the practice squad, are they going to be brought back up? Or are they going to just ride their ponies and have their short slot guys there with it? So there are a lot of intriguing things going into this. Mike McDaniel today, very, very keened in on the pass rush ability of the Jacksonville Jaguars and what they're able to do. There's not a lot of information on it because they have a new defensive coordinator and what he's bringing to the table. He said they've had like minimal tape going into this game. So that kind of reverts to it. Well, it's all about them then. You know, how can they go out and execute, because they are bringing some new things to the fold in this game. But a real fascinating matchup, and one that's got to, you know, for the Dolphins, you got to set the tone for the season right off the bat.